people that I'm coaching, I'm saying you need to know how to evaluate markets because they're going to change. So you're going to have to do this again later. So even if you skip it because you want to go with one of the hot markets, you need to know how to do this at some point. You might as well learn it now. And in that process, usually what happens, some of the people have already decided I'm going to invest where I live. And as they're analyzing the market, they realize, man, my market's fine, but this one is incredible. So if I've got, to use an analogy, if I got $1,000 and I can convert that into $5 a month in market A or $30 a month in market B, at that point, it's just a matter of priority. Is it worth $25 a month for you to be near, or are you okay with systematizing so that you can do it remotely?
Welcome. This is the Hot Real Estate Investing Podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping others through real estate investing. Our hosts interview guests from all aspects of real estate investing who generously share valuable experiences and advice. Whether you're starting out or an experienced investor, this is the show for you.
Hello and how's it going? My name is Travis Shelton and welcome to the Hot Real Estate Investing Podcast, where we focus on the mindset, motivation, and methodologies of successful real estate investors. And I'm really excited to have a conversation today with a real estate investor, entrepreneur, and professional diaper changer. Welcome to the show, Blake.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Definitely. Well, we got to kind of catch up and get to know each other a little bit before we hit the record button. Would you mind sharing with the audience just a little bit more about yourself and your real estate focus?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I got started. I'm not too dissimilar from probably almost most of the listeners. I worked hard in school, or at least hard enough, what I thought was hard. I went to university, I got good degrees. I was a good little boy. I did everything right, or what I was told to do. Got into the W-2 and was just kind of realizing, man, it's going to be a long time to get to 70. I'm not even sure I'll make it that long. And so I bought my first house just because I was tired of moving around. I was a bachelor coming up on 30, and I wanted to have like a place to put my roots down, and rented it out to my buddies. And that was kind of an aha moment for me. And then I started looking to scale more. So I started investing remotely because I was living in Austin, Texas. It's just too expensive. The median home price was at that time something like $400,000, maybe $500,000. Now it's spiked since then. And so I had to start essentially considering, what's my priority? Is it being near my properties, or is it more cash flow? And for me, it was cash flow. And so I started investing remotely and kind of, learned how to do that. Had some big failures. First contractor walked off with 12 grand, and then kind of figured it out, and then scaled from there, building, a multimillion-dollar portfolio in 18 months, retired in 2 years, and first self-made millionaire in my family line. So, just that's kind of my story, just a normal guy trying to figure it out and having a little bit of success along the way.
No, that's amazing, and really appreciate you sharing that kind of maybe the beginning of the story, and we'll dive in a little bit deeper. We always start these shows with some motivation, but I got a lot of motivation just hearing your story, and that's kind of what I think a lot of our listeners want to do. And the focus of why we do this podcast is helping others through real estate investing, and trying to be able to take these people that are burnt out in their W-2s, or just want a different type of life for themselves, and being able to transition to finding more passive income, being able to invest in real estate. So really looking forward to continuing our conversation. But would you mind sharing your motivational quote with the audience today?
Yeah, they may be familiar with it. It's called "The Man in the Arena." It's by Theodore Roosevelt. And it will help anybody who has some haters that say you can't invest in real estate, you don't come from money, or maybe the internet trolls are attacking you saying you're doing something wrong. And it goes like this. I've got it printed out in fact, it's right over. This was a gift right here from my older sister, because I value this so much. But it says it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And there's a
I love
portion
this
in
quote.
there. The
Yeah.
Daring Greatly is actually a book by Brene Brown, who it was inspired by this quote. And so this, this has inspired me, continues to inspire me. If I ever get, my chin in my chest a little bit down or something like that, I remember that
Yeah.
I'm actually doing the work. I can't
Yeah.
take the advice of somebody who hasn't gone where I want to go or isn't going where I want to go. And so hopefully that's an encouragement and a motivation to your listeners.
Absolutely. I love that quote. And it's something very similar to the sort of quotes that I typically share on this. And it's that people make progress through failures, right? Unfortunately, and you learn the most through those failures, but you have to do the work. Like you have to get started. So many people have analysis paralysis. They want to do it's like you learn from doing and you get better and you improve. But if you sit back and you never take action, you're never going to know what works and what doesn't work
Right.
for you. And I always tell people my own personal story. Hey, I've pivoted 4 or 5 or 6 different times in real estate investing. It's not because one failed every time. It was like, hey, this was more active than passive, or this was didn't make as much cash flow, or I was looking for more appreciation here. And now I'm looking for more cash flow. So I was like, there's reasons why you change throughout the course. But until you get started or until you make some of those failures or actually get your hands dirty, like you're not going to ever get to where you want to get to. So really, thank you for sharing that quote. I love that quote. Definitely, I love that it's so impactful to your life that you actually have something made, and it's that important in your own life. So really, thank you for sharing
Yeah,
that.
of course. Yeah, you make a really good point. I think one challenge for new investors is there's so many options for making money in real estate, so you don't really know where to start. And I think that can lead a lot of people to analysis paralysis or just not getting started because it has to be the perfect option the first time. And so pivoting really shows
Exactly.
that you are growing and you're moving in the right direction, and you're asking, is this the best option for me? As you should with anything in your relationships, in
Hmm.
your business, in your friendships, all of those things. You want to ask, is this getting me? Are the actions that I'm taking getting me the results? If you're trying to get a six pack and you say the action I'm going to take is I'm going to eat a Snickers bar every day, you're probably going to be screwed. But so you
Yeah.
need to switch up your actions. And so the credit belongs to the people that are actually trying to do it. The hard part is it's scary, and it's going to challenge your fears and your insecurities. And I've said for the longest time that I don't think it takes luck to make money. It takes courage. It takes people that are
Mm,
courageous and willing to step out into something that's scary or maybe even unknown and actually do the work. And so that's why that quote means so much to me.
absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks again. So kind of diving into the main part now of the podcast, how can you help our audience of real estate investors? And I wanted to kind of start with a kind of a basic question for someone really just starting out, right? And they're looking for cash flowing rental properties. What is your recommendation of whether they should invest remotely or maybe in their own backyard? Like what's your deciding factor there? You kind of talked about you were living in Austin, it was too expensive, so you started investing remotely. So kind of talk me through that process and how you kind of recommend to maybe some of your students where they should invest.
Yeah, that's a great question because it depends on your goals and your constraints. And so if your goals, and you've got to be honest with yourself, which is actually pretty difficult to do, to be honest with yourself. And so if your goals
Yeah.
are cash flow and you live in Portland or in New York City, Manhattan, you live in the Bay Area, you're screwed if you're looking to invest in
Yep.
your market. And so you've got to come up with another option. If your goals are appreciation, that's fine. If your goal is to be completely hands off, a syndication makes perfect sense. But first, you've got to define your goals. Then, as you're looking at your goals in the distance, you're kind of looking through the window pane of your constraints. So if you say, I want cash flow, but I have no money, you got to use a different model than if you say, I want cash flow and I got $1 million sitting around. Well, then you can just throw 20% down on a bunch of properties, right?
Yep.
But if you don't have any money to start out with, like I did, I didn't have any money. I worked my butt off to get 10 grand of what I called stupid money or tuition to the School of Hard Knocks because I knew I was going to make some mistakes and I was going to have to
Yeah.
pay for it. And I figured, 10 grand should be enough for that. So I worked for a few years to
Yeah.
really save that up. And then, my first contractor walked out with 12. So that's something we can
Yeah.
get into on another day. But what that allowed me to do was I still own that property, and that property made me a
It's
bunch of
amazing.
money. And so
Yep.
what I tell people is first define your goals. And generally
Okay.
for me, when I started, my goals were one, I wanted cash flow because I wanted to be able to be work optional. I wanted to be, my job wasn't horrible. They treated me really well. The work was really pretty exciting and engaging, but I just didn't want to
Yeah.
have to work. I didn't want
Yeah.
somebody to be able to tell me what to do, and then two,
Yeah.
40, 50, 60 hours a week. that gets old, especially when you
Real
look
quick.
down the road and you say, what is this getting me? A 3%,
Yeah.
6% raise every year. I don't know. I think I could do better. I'm going to bet on myself. So
Yeah.
first establish your goals. Mine were cash flow, and then I wanted a low price of entry because
Okay.
if I was going to get a first property at $10 million and I screw that up 10%, that I'm bankrupt. But if I've got a
Yeah.
$100,000 property and I screwed up 10%, that's not quite that bad. I mean, I don't want to donate $10,000, but
Sure.
it's better for me. And then the last one was I wanted it to have moderate appreciation, at least hold its value. I really just didn't want the market to go down and me to be underwater, but I wasn't planning on
Okay.
appreciation. And so those were my priorities. So for people that have cash flow as a priority, you have to find a cash flow market. And it's likely not for probably 90% of Americans, it's not going to be in your backyard. There's the chance that
True.
you might live in a good cash flow market, but the likelihood is no, especially if you're ever saying, man, real estate's too expensive. Chances are you don't live in a good cash flow market, because there are markets out there. Two markets that I'm seeing really good cash flow opportunities for my students are Dayton,
Yeah.
Ohio, and Birmingham, Alabama.
Mm.
You can buy
Yeah.
a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,400 square foot house for $100,000 or less and rent that out for $1,200 to $1,500 a month, just on repeat, right? And
Yeah.
they've also got duplexes and quadplexes and eightplex, right? So the rent to price ratio is really strong, and that's what I tell my students to look for when I'm coaching them on how to find a cash flow market. Is you want to understand what the rent to price ratio is of the market, because our
Okay.
rent to price ratio is the best metric or indicator of a property's likelihood to cash flow. And so it's just the monthly rent divided by the price. Then you've just got to figure out how to find that for the market as a whole, and then
Hmm.
compare markets to each other.
So are you doing this kind of annually? Is there a certain number you're looking for, like that 1% rule or the 2% rule? Is there a certain metric you're actually specifically looking for within these? Yeah, I call them kind of boring markets,
Mhm.
right?
Oh
Like
yeah,
everyone that like I live in Phoenix, Austin. Everyone knows these
they're
sexy markets
sexy.
that
Yeah,
do nothing but appreciate, right?
yeah.
And I've been like you, like I made a lot of money in Phoenix, but I have not been cash flowing. So just recently been kind of pivoting to saying, hey, and I went and found a very small, boring market, in South Carolina that I do my investing in now and looking to expand investing because, to your point, the cash flows there and it will moderately appreciate over time. So, how frequently are you kind of reviewing different markets, maybe for your students, or is there a specific metric you're looking to kind of hit to be able to choose that market, like that 1% or 2% rule?
Yeah, what I recommend is once you pick a market, stay and focus on that one market. The reason why you
Okay.
would switch or add a market is either one, the market characteristics have changed, or two, you're not getting the deal flow that you need to be able to continue to
Hmm.
scale. In that case, you would add a market. Or three, you own the entire market and there are no properties left for you to buy. And so
Yeah.
the market characteristics changing, this will happen every now and again.
Okay.
Generally, I think a cash flow market has a 3 to 5 year period of holding. Some longer, some shorter. A good example of this would be Waco, Texas. Chip and Joe Gaines with Fixer Upper.
Yeah.
The work that they did, it went from a cash flow market to an appreciation market reasonably quickly. So it was a cash flow market up until say
Mm.
2 or 3 years ago, and now it's more of an appreciation market. And so there's that. If you're not getting the deals that you need, my first question is, are you doing the work to actually source those deals? Are you finding wholesalers? If your strategy is direct to seller, are you iterating on your strategy with direct to seller, or is it getting stale? What's your cost per lead essentially? So
Mhm.
that's what I recommend, is start out picking one market and focus on that market. The metric that I coach toward is rent to price ratio, and that's easier to
Okay.
find for a single family home because you know the rent, you know the price that you're
Yeah.
paying. And the 1% rule, some people hear it as the 1% or 2% rule. That's really just
Yeah.
rent to price ratio for anybody listening.
Sure.
And
Exactly.
1% is essentially a break even. You're probably not going to cash flow that much, if anything, but it needs to be above 1% for you to reasonably expect cash flowing. And so when you're doing this at a market level, there's a few approaches you can use. I use median 3-bedroom rent as the rent price for the market,
Okay.
and median home value. And that number, to even consider the market, has to be above zero point 0.7. If it's above 1.0, you're in a really good spot. So
Okay.
that's kind of my first filter, and then I look at some economic data. But the bottom line filter is going through and looking at least 30 comps for rental grade properties. So 3-bed,
Okay.
2-bath, 1,400 square foot houses, and get down to a rent to price ratio. Average all those out, throw out
Okay.
the outliers. If one is a 2.5% rent to price ratio, throw that one out. It's going to mess up your data. That number has to
Yeah.
be above 1.0. And then you're essentially saying the average deal in this market is a 1%er. And I'm not an average person. I'm going to find better deals than the average
Yeah.
deal. But if I come into a market where the average deal is a 1%er, I could be an idiot. I could actually stumble into deals. Like I've got a 2-year-old and he's grown out of all of his clothes. And it's almost like if my wife told me, "Hey, go find Brandon another outfit." If I went to Home Depot, how successful could I possibly be? I could be the most engaged and loving father. There's no way I'm coming home with anything helpful. A tarp and some rope,
Yeah.
maybe. But if I just stumble, if I stumble into Walmart, I could be unengaged, not even caring. I'd come home with something effective. That's what picking the right market does for a remote investor.
Yeah.
So that's those steps are kind of my cheat code for how I teach people to evaluate markets. It's simpler. It's more science than it is art, which I think most people
Yeah.
think it's an art. The investing in real estate is more artistic, and certainly the flipping and the Airbnb type of business has a little bit of an artistic component. Everything else is science. It's just numbers and spreadsheets and reproducibility. So hopefully that serves them as they're looking for their own market. But the ones that I'm seeing really good deals come out of: Birmingham, Alabama;
Yeah.
Dayton, Ohio; Akron and Toledo, Ohio; Macon, Georgia. I invest in
Mm.
Abilene, Texas. If you're interested in Abilene, Texas, great. Come on. It used to be a
Nice.
fantastic cash flow market. Now it's a good cash flow market. It's probably not anything I'm going to write home about, but I can still find good
Yeah.
deals. They used to be screamers, but markets change.
Yeah. For
So
sure.
yeah.
I think that's such an incredible point, what you just said. Markets change, and you need to know your market. And I tell people you need to be an expert at your market. And it's really hard to be an expert at 50 different
Yeah.
markets, right? And a lot of people go out there and they find one deal, and then maybe they stay in that market because they're like, oh, I did good. And then, well, the deals keep getting worse. And to your point, these, you might call it a blue ocean. Well, Abilene was a blue ocean. Well, then all of a sudden, people saw how great the cash flow was, and all of a sudden it becomes a red ocean because you get a ton of investors going there.
Mhm.
You get every podcaster and every bigger pockets person in the world talking about Memphis, Tennessee, and then all of a sudden Memphis becomes a hot
Or
market,
Huntsville,
and you can't find those
Alabama.
sorts of deals.
Yeah. Huntsville
Yeah,
used to be
Huntsville,
screaming, and now
exactly.
everybody's there. There's sharks everywhere.
I went there 5 years ago to look at real estate, and I almost bought in Huntsville.
Mhm.
And I have family and actually kind of in Birmingham and in that area in Alabama. And we loved it, but it was just investing out of state, investing so far. I live in Phoenix. It was 3,000 miles away. And then ironically, I ended up investing in South Carolina, even further away without family there. But, you evaluate the markets and you do what you think's best. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of markets. And so I think staying on top of the market is so important. And maybe it's at that point where you can get 2 or 3 deals in a market, and then the sea gets red, and you get a lot of investors in there. I know a lot of people like in the Smoky Mountains, and everyone that was doing Airbnbs out there, during COVID, they were buying $200,000-$300,000 houses. Well, now they're 750,000. Those don't cash flow, guys.
Mhm.
Like, people are losing their money left and right because, yeah, it's just those other people were at a cost basis of 250, and you're at a cost basis of 750 at this point.
Yeah.
So really, really great points there. But would you say the vast majority of your students or people that you're helping begin in real estate, they're investing out of state to begin with? Because likely, like you said, 90% of them are living in a big
Mhm.
major metro market.
Yeah, I've got probably 250 students, and maybe 4 or 5 of them invest where they live, just for that reason.
Wow.
And I even tell
Yeah.
them, you need to go through the market analysis process, even if you already know where you're going to invest,
Yeah.
because markets change, right? That's why I said that 3 to
Hmm.
5 year window, because everybody's going to rush in there, start buying. If you get in there, you get a few deals, and you realize, man, something's going on here. It's just a matter of time before more people figure it out. And that's the beauty of
Absolutely.
a free market economy. That's what's so
Yeah.
wonderful about it, is if there's something valuable about a market, people are going to go there, and it provides value to the investor and to the people in that market. And so the people that I'm coaching, I'm saying, you need to know how to evaluate markets, because they're going to change. So you're going to have to do this again
Yeah.
later. So even if you skip it because you want to go with one of the hot markets, you need to know how to do
Sure.
this at some point. You might as well learn it now. And in that process,
Yeah.
usually what happens, some of the people have already decided, I'm going to invest where I live. And as they're analyzing the market, they realize, man, my market's fine, but this one is incredible. So if I've got, to use an analogy, if I got $1,000 and I can convert that into $5 a month in market A or $30 a month in market B, at that point, it's just a matter of priority. Is it worth 25
Yeah.
bucks a month for you to be near, or are you
Mhm.
okay with systematizing so that you can do it remotely? That's all the question is. And you got to be honest with yourself about what that right answer is. And if the answer is I want to be near it because I'm scared, at least you're being honest with yourself. That's fair. You
Yeah.
prove out the process
Yeah.
and then you say, well, maybe the skill development of doing it remotely is the next thing that I pick up. And that's okay too.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I find with a lot of people and investors I meet with is they tend to want at least that first one close, and then they get a lot more comfortable. And I kind of talk, and that's how I was as an investor. I always wanted to invest in my backyard until recently. And I've become a lot more comfortable with either, utilizing other people to invest for me. So I can truly be like an investor and just have my money work for me and have other people do it and be a passive investor, but then also being active out of state. So I think sometimes I'm actually very surprised that of 250 of your students, only 4 really do it in their
Mhm.
where they live as opposed to out of state. But that's awesome that you're coaching people to that, and you're able to realize the value of these people building their teams and real estate teams in other markets to be able to ultimately achieve what their goals are, and that's the cash flow likely from these deals. So with all these students and the people that you coach, how many of these individuals are buying these homes like they have enough money to just go out there and buy these homes outright or be able to put 20% down, or kind of what strategies are you teaching them to be able to I always find most people are ready able to buy their first investment. It's those subsequent ones that are difficult because
Mhm.
it's harder to raise the money or save the money. So kind of what strategies are you teaching your students to be able to, buy these properties or so many of the properties?
Yeah, my approach is I want my students to be fully autonomous investors. And so when I'm done
Hmm.
with them, I want them to not need me. And so if I'm going to do that, I have to start with some of the foundation basics. I can't just say like, all right, this one we can go ahead and take sub 2 and then we can wrap it, and there's just too much complexity there for them to even understand. And so
Okay.
I think the basics at the very beginning are the building blocks to then being able to have a tool belt of different options. Say we can use creative finance over here, we could seller finance this one, we could wrap that one. But the basic
Hmm.
ones are the ones that I'm teaching at first. And that generally my
Okay.
students fall into 2 categories. I'd say about 20% of them have some money and they're willing to do turnkey. The benefit of turnkey
Okay.
is that it's simpler, right? You can prove out the market. You can do most of everything, almost all of the variables you can learn just by putting 20% down. The trade off is it's a lower return and it's not as scalable, right? So, right now, you're
Yeah.
looking at probably a 10% cash on cash return. Between 10 and 20% is usually what turnkey investors are targeting. So, it's a lower return, but it gets you some momentum, and momentum's a big deal. So, it gets you some
Yeah.
momentum. It also proves out your market. It forces you to find an agent, property manager, build out your team there, understand the market a little bit, have some deal sources coming in. And then it's even operational things as practical as when they pay rent, you get money. Like it actually hits your account.
Yeah.
Those practical things, setting up those systems so that you can buy your time back. Have a property manager manage it, and have a contractor, or the property manager even manages the contractor or the subs that need to go in and fix, replace locks or turn the property, whatever it might be. So that's 20%. I'd say 80% of my students are using the BRRRR method. So they're people that have said,
Okay.
man, I don't have a ton of money, but I do have some time to put into this. And my goal is you should be spending, I think 3 to 6 hours a week is a reasonable amount of time for you to be getting a door within 90 days. So
For
now
sure.
this has to be a priority for you. I contend that everybody has between 3 and 5 main priorities in their life. And so maybe you've got your job and then you got your family. And then depending on capacity, everybody's capacity is different, maybe 1 to 3 more priorities. It's probably got to be one of those other ones.
Okay.
Because I don't commit to anything weekly unless it's a priority. Like I'm
Yeah.
not. If someone comes up to me and says, "Hey, will you mentor me? I'd like to meet with you weekly." I'm like, I can't, because I've got my family,
Yeah.
I've got all of these other things that I got to balance, and I have our lifestyle preferences that are goals for us. So for
Awesome.
me, I'm saying 3 to 6 hours a week should be reasonable, and I'm teaching them the BRRRR method on how to invest with low or no money down.
And do you recommend that those people are raising money for their own deals or their first couple deals, or are they typically all going in kind of self-funded to these sorts of transactions?
Well, most people that are doing the BRRRR model, they don't have enough money to self-fund. In fact, I've had some people
Okay.
invest literally their last dime in the program, and now they've got 5, 6, 7 deals. And so what I recommend is if you need to use hard money. But private money is where it's
Okay.
at. And so and
Okay.
just to define those, because there are some hard money lenders out there marketing themselves as private money lenders. Private money lender is somebody with their own money that they're lending to you. They're an individual
Hmm.
and they can make their own decisions. Hard money lender is like a mini bank. They're optimized for maybe shorter turns on loans, but they still have, the more people you have, the more operational systems you have to agree to, right? Rules. And what that
Yeah.
means is it's harder for them to close faster. And so private money lending, you get better deals. And since they're an individual, you can just say, hey, will you fund this deal? Great, wire it over. And you can fund it in 6 hours if you want. And so I recommend private money. But what you run
Okay.
into as a new student, as a new investor, is when you go and talk to somebody, let's say you've already found somebody that has a bunch of money. I think probably within 5 doors of where all your listeners live each, there's some old lady driving a 92 Camry that has $4.2 million and it's underperforming and she just wants to spoil her grandkids. That's it. And she
Yep.
would be totally up for a double digit return, 12, 14, 16, 18%. So you're talking to her and you get to the end and they say, you know what? I believe in you. Let's do it. Just go do 3 or 4 doors first and then we'll get started. You're like, well, I kind of need the
Yeah.
money to get started. And so you're in a chicken and the egg situation. And so,
Sure.
one, I'm teaching my students how to raise private money so that they can continue to scale their own portfolio. But I also have private lenders that lend to my students for that specific
Okay.
reason. And these
Yeah.
private lenders really kind of came out of, similar to what we were talking about earlier. They said, I want to learn real estate investing. And then we talked about what their priorities were on their time. And I said, no, you don't. You don't. You just want your
Yeah.
money to grow. And so I think the best option for you is private lending. You can make 14, 16, 18% and do nothing. I mean, private lending,
Yeah.
I've private lend all the time. I do it. It's the easiest money I've ever made. It's not
Yeah.
quite as, I'm not going to make as much. It's not as much money
Sure.
as investing in the real estate itself. But if you've got money just sitting there, even in a home equity line of credit, and it's just sitting there not doing anything, you can make good money off of that. And it's very, very secure because you've got a lien on the property. So if the
Yep.
investor turns out to be a scoundrel and runs off and tries to go to Jamaica and spend all your money, well, they can't because you have a lien on the home and you get the entire home. So
Yeah.
that on the private money side of things, my recommendation is to raise private money. And for the
Okay.
interim where they're like, I'm new at this, and nobody trusts me because maybe they trust my character, but my competence, they don't really think I know anything, which is fair
Hmm.
if you're honest. Um,
Sure.
then I provide them with some private lenders so that they can fund some deals.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, and I guess that was probably my follow up question was like, hey, do you have a best practice of finding these private lenders? Because it's always like you can always teach that, yeah, this is the best way, but if you can't actually find that private money, especially as a newbie with that first or second deal, so it's awesome that you have those resources for your own students. But I guess maybe someone that's not one of your students or someone in the audience. Other than just maybe knowing that neighbor doors
Yeah, yeah.
down, the old grandma, any maybe best practices for the audience of maybe how they can find maybe their first private money lender?
Great. Yeah, great question. My first thing that I'd recommend is just let people know that you're doing it.
Hmm.
Talk about it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as you got a favorite football team, you got a favorite basketball team, you're watching the basketball playoffs, you're talking about it all the time. If you
Yep.
like real estate, just talk about it. Some people aren't going to care.
It's
Other
true.
people are going to be like, "Huh, that's really interesting." Maybe you have a conversation about it. But your goal is for them to think, when they think real estate, who do I know in real estate? They think about your name.
Yep.
And one of the
Yep.
best ways to do that, love it or hate it, is social media. And so if right now you're using
Hmm.
your social media for cat memes and, funny videos and stuff, or checking up on, your high school ex to make sure they're doing worse than you, instead use social media to your advantage to brand yourself as the real estate person. And this is what I did early. I
Yeah.
I raised $100,000 before I had a deal. I didn't have anything.
That's awesome.
I didn't have anything to prove. It was a buddy's cousin who had some money and he wanted to make more than the stock market with less volatility, because God knows somebody can tweet something or Reddit comes up with something and it goes up, down, around. You
Yep.
just never know. And it reasonably liquid. They were going to have their money back in 6 months. And so,
Yeah.
and that was just because they knew I was into real estate. So that's what I'd say is talk
Yeah.
about it, make sure that people know about it. And then the more proactive method for it is ask around. And so what
Yeah.
I would say to somebody that was asking Blake, how do I raise private money? I'd say set an hour on your calendar every single week, because this is one of the two things that makes a good investor: raising money and making offers. Those are the two highest and best uses of your time. So if
Yeah.
you're looking to raise money, set an hour on your calendar every single week and reach out to people that you know that either A, have money, or B, are well connected. And all you want to do with them is a two-step process. The first step is probably a 3 to 5 minute conversation where you do the intro pleasantries. Hey, how's it going? Hey, I thought of you because I'm investing in real estate and I'm looking to partner with people that want these things. One, they want a better return than their savings account is giving them. They want less volatility than the market or than the stock market, because that's up, down, and around. And they want it to be
Mm-hmm.
protected, asset protected, right? A
Mm.
reasonably low risk investment and get,
Yeah.
double digit returns. Do you know anybody that would help? Right? You're just trying to connect
Yeah.
with the right people. So when you ask, do you know anybody? You're giving them an easy opt out instead of saying, would you like to buy my widget for 2 easy payments
Yeah.
of $19.95? You're giving them an easy opt out, but you're also giving them a way to opt in. I can't tell you the amount of
Yeah.
people who have said, yeah, I can think of 2 or 3 people, but us specifically, our family, we've got 400 sitting around. I'm not quite sure what to do with it. And right now it's just sitting in a checking account, right? Making
Yeah.
literally, or a savings account making 0.23%. But the other component is asking the right questions and trying to find the right person, because you're not trying to find
Mm.
everybody is not your right lender. You're not trying to convince every person to be your lender. You're just asking enough questions to
Yeah.
find the people that are. So if you look into a sea of people, some of them are going to be the right people. You just have to get through all the ones that are not. And by asking those
Sure.
questions, you're kind of defining your ideal customer, right? They say, I don't want the volatility of the market. I don't trust the stock market, and I'm not willing to hold for 30 years. Right? The stock market outperforms
Yeah.
if you just put it in index funds and you hold long term, great. But you don't know
Yeah.
if you're going to have a medical emergency when the market is tanked, right?
Sure. Yeah.
At that point, you just kind of cut your losses. So they don't want the volatility of the stock market. They don't want the return that they're getting in their savings account, which historically is 0.23%, and they want it to be safe.
Yeah.
So those are the things that you want to pitch. You say, hey, is this interesting to you? Would this help you? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. If they say no, they don't know anybody, you say, okay, well, keep an ear out. Keep an ear out. What is there anything I can do to help you?
Yeah.
And offer
Yeah.
something in return. So that's the first step. And then the second step is, if they say yes, say, well, let's set 30 minutes to talk about it. See if it's a good fit. Because I don't know your goals. I'd want to understand your goals and make sure it's a good fit. And then if it is, I can tell you a little bit about how I do it. In that
Yeah.
conversation, your primary goal is just to understand what they want out of their money, what they want
Yeah.
their money to
Okay.
do for them. And if it meets what you can offer, great. But if it doesn't, they're not a good fit, and you should ask for a referral. Here's what I do. It sounds like this isn't a really good fit for you, but do you know anybody that I should connect with? I had a conversation with one guy. He kind of bootstrapped a tech company he's a tech whiz. He had an algorithm that kind of helped him trade in the stock market. He could put $5,000 out, get 60 grand in probably 4 hours, and he would do that once a week to kind of bootstrap his business. And I said, you know what? That's a better option than investing private money with me. So here's how I work. If you want something like this, great. But if
Yeah.
I were in your shoes, I'd keep doing that. That's a good option. But
Yeah.
that meeting is to say, are we a good fit? And if they say, yeah, we're a good
Yes.
fit, your goal then is to just say, how much do you have available and what terms do you want would work for you? And then you go hunt. You go find a
Yeah.
really good deal. You bring it to them and say, awesome, let's go ahead and get this going. But that's what I would tell them, that two-step process in asking
Yeah.
around and then trying to figure out what are their goals and do they match your goals for your money.
Pause, rewind, listen to that again, because that really was gold of how you establish a relationship, when to align with an investor. Also, that not every single person is going to be the right fit for you. You might even find someone, an investor, that they want to invest with you and you don't want them, you don't want to take their money. I have actually one or two of those individuals that, like, someone's investing $50,000 and they've contacted me 50 times in the last 2 or 3 days. that's what that relationship's going to be like. Is that the sort of relationship you want? I set the same expectations as those people. So I think that's so important. And then kind of going back to, I always tell the story of, I got my real estate license in 2014. I got my doctorate of pharmacy in 2009. And when I'd meet people, even with my dad, always would get mad and frustrated with me because he said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a realtor." And he like, "You have a doctorate.
Yeah.
You're a
Yeah.
pharmacist. Like, you should be telling people that you do that." I go, "Dad, when I tell people I'm a pharmacist, they ask me some weird, obscure drug question. They pull down their pants to show me some rash and what I can help, recommend for them, or something completely stupid that I don't want to have a conversation about. I'm like, I'm passionate about real estate, and if I tell someone I'm a realtor, we talk real estate, which is something I want to talk about. Two, if they're in a market or if they have a question about real estate, that might lead to a lead and me making more money. So I love the fact that that point of you telling, just tell everyone, what do you do today in your W-2 that you want to talk about? That is it going to make you more money? Maybe if you're self-employed and you're a realtor, but otherwise, like if you're a real estate investor, you should be talking to everyone about real estate and let everyone know that you love real estate and you're investing in real estate. And if they're interested to hit you up. And so just great. I mean, just gold. So really appreciate that. Um, I guess now, are you ready for the hot seat,
Let's do
Blake?
it.
All right,
Do it.
let's do it. All right, I ask all my guests the same final four hot questions. So, number one, what is one book you'd recommend to someone wanting to know more about real estate investing?
I there's so much psychology involved with money, so I'd recommend The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. I read it
Beautiful, love it.
probably twice a year.
I love books that you can read a couple
Mm.
times or continue to read and gain value every time you read it. So I have not read that one, so I'm definitely going to pick it up. So thanks for that
It's worth
recommendation.
$1,000. Yeah.
I love it. Awesome. All right, what is your favorite productivity tip, trick, tool, or maybe some app or time saver that lets you get more done than the average person?
Yeah, I would say uh, one thing that helps me the best is writing down at the beginning of every day or the night before, today will be a success if, and answering that question and being realistic with
I
it.
love
That's
that.
one. The other is I'm ADHD, so I don't task swap very well as far as focus. So I need at least a 4 hour chunk to really get
Mhm.
meaningful work done. That's one thing I've learned about me. And so Monday and Friday are blocked. Nobody has meetings on my calendar Monday and Friday. Monday is admin. Friday I'm off slash doing things that are more more high level and doing some
Okay.
kind of goal planning and stuff like that. And so that's one of the ways that I've said, you know what, I'm different than the normal person, and what's the best way to make me successful? And so
Yeah.
those are the two things that I use.
So important to actually identify how you work best. And then I love the time blocking. I'm a big time blocker and block a lot of my schedule too because ADHD over here too. So it's just like you
Let's
got to be able
go.
to you got to know yourself well enough to know how you get the most out of yourself. So, what's your biggest real estate mistake or failure, and what did you learn from that experience?
I would say my biggest mistake that I made. This was early. I think this was property number 3, 757 Mesquite. Wiley Winch. So I got it at a really good price, or what I thought. I had a contractor go in, walk the whole property. It was very distressed, and so I didn't have an inspection done on it. That's my
Mm,
foreshadowing. I didn't have an inspection done on it, but I got a contractor quote beforehand. We closed on everything. I send the contractor in. We're good to go. We're rolling, and I get a really big change order. So a change order, for
mm,
those that don't know, is the contractor saying, "Hey, there's something we missed, and it's going to cost this big amount of money." And so I
yeah.
said, "Hey, what's going on with this?" My general contractor's name was Sarah. I said, "What's going on with this? Like, this is not what we talked about." And she sent me back one picture. And the picture, this is a pier and beam home. And so the picture, when they
Okay.
tore up the flooring, what they saw was one of the beams holding, or one of the piers holding up the beams, was not a pier. It was an old stump that they'd cut down a tree, and they just used that tree stump as the pier.
Oh my
And so
goodness.
she said, "Well, we didn't plan for this." And so what I learned from that is you need to have an inspection on every property. And now
Yeah.
there's a good reason to not have an inspection if you're getting it at such a good deal and speed is of important. But I'd say 98% of the time, get an inspection on a property so that you can avoid things like that.
No, definitely. Well, we've heard some good stories. It's very similar. So thanks for sharing that one. And finally, Blake, if you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Being the best husband and father that people know.
That's awesome. You're gonna be coming second to me, but I'll
Hey,
let you
I'm
always
okay with
strive
that.
to
Yeah,
be the
top 2.
best.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We'll let
No,
our
but I love it.
spouses and our kids vote, and so maybe we'll
Ex
be tied at top.
exactly. No, I appreciate that, and I always love when people are so focused and driven on their business, but they also realize what's most important, and that's family and their kids. And so you always get to kind of know what sort of type of person. I get to learn what type of people are based on that answer. And so I know you're a good guy, and you got a great referral from one of my great friends, Andrew. So I know you're even a better guy because of that. Um, the best place for the Hot RAI community to connect with Blake is going to be on his YouTube channel and also on his website. I'll be sure to include all his linked contact information in our show notes. Blake, dude, thank you so much today. It was a lot of fun for me. I learned a lot, and I know the audience gained a lot of value from this podcast. So just thank you again, buddy.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
And to the audience, thank you for tuning in, and commit to taking action today to move your investing forward. Take care, and God bless.
Thank you for listening to the Hot Real Estate Investing Podcast. Check out our website, hotrei.com, for additional content and resources. And please take a moment to subscribe and leave a review so we can continue to bring even more value to others through real estate investing.